Hi, welcome to Gemini Star Spiritual Wellness. Thank you for joining me today. So, in this video, we're going to talk about another topic that I really find dear to my heart that I really enjoy. And we're going to be talking about plants and trees. So, it's interesting topic, but I wanted to talk about it in a little greater detail because I've got some really cool information I want to share with you about plants and trees. So, plants and trees have consciousness. Just like I said in an earlier video, all things have consciousness. So in the previous video, I talked about water having consciousness. Today, I'm going to be talking about how trees and plants have consciousness. So, I never really thought about this, growing up that about plants and I always had a connection to plants and trees. I always really liked them and I enjoyed being around them and I enjoyed, spending time around them. But as a kid and as a person, young person, I didn't understand that they had consciousness and they had energy and I didn't know about any of that. All I knew is that I enjoyed being around them and they made me feel good when I was around them. And so I enjoyed, spending time with them and smelling flowers, and I enjoyed picking flowers and being around them. So now that I've started to spiritually awaken, I've had some interesting experiences with them myself, but I started to kind of do some research and go down the rabbit holes and had some interesting studies I want to share with you about that back up about them having consciousness that prove that they have consciousness. So first, I want to talk about my personal experience with them. So as I said, I was always drawn to them, always felt very relaxed around them, always wanted to be around them. I love like walking through a forest and being around the trees and being in the park when there's lots of, grass and plants and trees. I always was drawn to that. Always enjoyed being around them. And now that I've gone through this for many years, I understand more why at this point, but back then I didn't really know why. But, when I started to spiritually awaken in, 15, it took a couple years after this when I had this experience. So, I remember back in 2019, I took a trip to Texas for my work, and, I was in San Antonio, and I remember, going to one of the missions that they have there because they have the Alamo, but there's a bunch of other missions there as well. There's, like, a whole line of them, and they're, like, in a row, in a line, and you can visit them. They're open to the public, and I remember I went to one, not the Alamo, but another one, and, after I was done walking around and looking and, because they have, like, a museum there, and then you had the actual, that you could tour the actual mission, that's there, and they're from the early 1700s, so it was really quite fascinating. And I remember, touring around, and I was finished, and I was waiting for the bus to take me to the next one, and I was leaning against the tree and they had these really big, they looked like oak trees that they had around the mission. And of course, these were huge trees. They've been around for hundreds of years. And I remember leaning against a tree and I put my hand on the tree, just, leaning there, resting. And I suddenly, for the first time in my life, and it never happened before now, or at least I never noticed it until now. But when I put my hand on the tree, I felt this like, if you can see my arm, try to find the camera there. This tingling sensation, like my hands on the tree, and I felt this tingling sensation coming up my arm. And I was like, "What on earth am I feeling?" Because I never felt that before. And I noticed when I took my hand off the tree that it would stop. And I put my hand back on the tree and it's coming up, that tingling sensation's coming up my arm again. And I was like, "Wow, that's crazy," because that was the same kind of feeling I got with crystals, which I'm gonna do another video on that, probably the next video I do will be about crystals, but I remember, like, thinking to myself, "That's crazy, I never felt this before," and I'm sure the people that were there, the other tourists probably thought I was crazy because I kept putting my hand on the tree, taking it off. It was really, really cool, it was very cool, and I never felt that before, and I was like, "Wow, that's cool." So I came back from my trip and I tried it around trees around my house because I wanted to see if it was just a one-day thing or if it was every day I could feel this. So and of course, when I tried it around my house, trees around my house, yes, I could feel that off the trees still. And I was like, wow, it's neat. So as time went on, in 2020 goes by and, years go by, then I noticed I started feeling it around like plants, like house plants. Like if I touch the house plant leaf, I would feel that. And before, I didn't feel this before. But then all of a sudden, when I would touch the leaf and hold on to it, I would feel that tingling sensation. It felt kind of like an energetic, like energy going through you, like electricity, I guess, but not to the point where it hurts you, but you could feel it, I guess is a good way to describe what it feels like. And I could feel it going up my arm. I was like, wow, that's cool. And then as time went on, I started feeling it without having to touch the plants. Like even if I just bring my hand, like here by the mic, just a couple inches away, I can feel the energy coming off of them nowadays, which is really, really cool. So it's kind of progressed, as time has gone on, and I guess my vibration's gotten high enough now where I can feel it without even having to touch them, and I can feel it real easy now. So just really fascinating, but that's just my personal experience that I've had with plants. And, so I do talk to my plants. I rub their little leaves and talk to them when I water them. And like I said in an earlier video, I try to play classical music for them every once in a while. I don't do it as much as I should because sometimes I forget to do it, but I try to do that and try to talk to them. So they do have consciousness. And there was a study that I saw where they found out that when a plant is like really dehydrated and it needs watered, or if you cut the plant. So if you take like scissors and you cut it, and or if it's, needs water and it's dying because it doesn't have enough water, that it puts out this like high pitched, I guess, frequency scream that our human ears, our 3D ears can't hear that. We can't hear that pitch of them crying out, but apparently they've discovered that plants can do that. So if they're in distress, they can actually scream at a high frequency level for help, which is really quite interesting. And then I saw some studies about trees, and they found out that trees, like their network of roots underneath them, is they use that network of roots. Like if you're in the forest and you have a lot of trees, that's how they communicate with each other. So that roots isn't just about getting nutrients and water out of the soil. That's a way of communication between the trees. And they discovered that they send like, energy to each other, and they're kind of communicating in their own tree language to each other. And I just thought that was fascinating. And there's actually been reports because, as I was reading this, I'm like, I got to learn more. So I started digging into this stuff, and I found out that there's been like there's been I guess instances, recorded instances where trees have actually moved. So like they picked up guess their roots and moved to another location in the forest. I guess if they're not happy where they were, they just got up and moved. And there's been like documented cases of that. And I just think that's fascinating. And then another thing that's really cool, I saw some TikTok videos. I think it was on TikTok, it might have been on YouTube Shorts, but I saw some videos where people were asking trees, like they would stand next to a tree and they would ask the tree to touch them, and sure enough, the tree would like reach over with its branch and its leaves and like touch them on their shoulder or wherever, that they were asking them to touch them. And it would freak the people out, like, oh my gosh, the tree really touched me. Well, of course, it's conscious. It heard you, it knows what you're saying. So I wanted to test it myself. So by my deck, I've got two trees that are pretty close that I can stand on my deck and, be real close to them like that. So I went out to both trees and I asked a tree to touch me. And sure enough, it did. I remember one touched me on my shoulder because it like literally like I was close, but it wasn't close enough it could touch me. It had to make movement, like it had to move to reach me. And it literally moved its branch to the point where it could touch me with its leaf, and I thought that was fascinating. And then the other tree, I asked to touch my cheek, and it did the same thing, touch my cheek, and I just thought that was so cool. So those are some examples of, of some information about trees.